everybody, this is GRE Bites. My name is Davis. I'm an educator with 10 years of experience.
And I'm Orion, the founder of StellarGRE.
And we're here to bring you your weekly bite-sized episode of GRE prep and grad school admissions. For more information, check us out at StellarGRE.com.
I'm really happy to be doing this, Davis. This is going to be a lot of fun, I hope.
Yeah, this is so cool. Any opportunity to pick your brain and get to know about your experience with the GRE. So first, how did you come to get involved with the GRE and testing?
Yeah, it's a bit of a long story, but I guess it's important to get that out of the way first and foremost.
Bite size.
Of course, yeah, I don't want to bore the audience. So I have been in test prep and education for about 20 years, 19 years to be accurate. It was my first job out of undergrad. I worked for the Princeton Review doing SAT prep in Manhattan and the Bronx, and I cut my teeth working with all kinds of rambunctious high schoolers for about a year and a half, and decided, okay, I might want to try doing things my own way, and so I quit that job and founded my own tutoring company, Stellar Tutoring, and I taught all kinds of subject tests, SAT, GRE, GMAT, pretty much every standardized test under the sun. And I did that for several years as I was trying to subsidize my artistic pretensions as an actor. I was trying to make it as a theater actor in New York at that time. So that was my way of keeping a roof over my head, and I was very grateful for the work. I did that for a while, became a adjunct professor at the City University of New York teaching math. That was an interesting story. I just responded to a Craigslist ad, and it turned out to be a CUNY faculty position. I showed up and they said, "You're not qualified for this job." And I said, "You're right, I'm not. But since I came down, I might as well give you my spiel." And I gave them my spiel, and they hired me, and I taught there for a few years, which was an interesting experience as well. Got more and more interested in potentially going to grad school myself as I got into my later 20s. Decided to go back to grad school to get a doctorate in psychology, which I now have. I took the GRE myself at that point after probably helping hundreds of other people prepare for that test over 5 years, got a perfect score, and then moved on to San Francisco to pursue my doctorate. When I moved out here, I still now live in the Bay Area. I decided to focus exclusively on the GRE. That was kind of my bread and butter, and I used it to pay my way through grad school. When I first landed, I became the global master teacher of the quantitative section for Barron's Test Prep. So there are these online self-study programs. It used to be called Barron's, now I think it's called The Economist. And I was the guy in the quantitative videos doing all the explanations. And so I reached an audience of probably tens of thousands of students that way. And began to focus exclusively on the GRE. Over the last 10 years, I've worked with thousands of students in person, both through private tutoring and then increasingly through my small group classes, which are based out of San Francisco. And I've helped thousands of students get top percentile scores on this test, even a few get perfect scores. I've also worked with thousands of people to get into graduate school programs, which is really, really cool. And one of the amazing things about the Stellar system, if I may say so myself, is that I think it's the only test prep system on the planet that has empirical validation.
So what do you mean by empirical validation?
Yeah. So how do you know that any of this stuff works, right? I mean, if I were a customer in the market for a test prep system, I would want some reasonable assurance that this was actually going to help me get what I want, i.e. a higher score on the GRE. And most test prep companies don't collect outcome data on their students. They don't actually track the extent to which they improve as a result of engaging with their materials. What they generally do is offer like a money-back guarantee that if you don't improve by like 5 points, you either get your money back or you get to take the course again for free, which I always thought was kind of baffling because it's like if it didn't work the first time, why would you want to do it the second time? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think that's more of a marketing approach as opposed to like a scientific investigation into the effectiveness of the product. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's great. So from tutoring, multiple different tests in New York, paying your way through your first, adventures, acting, teaching, going back as a grad student yourself, having firsthand experience with this, what's your unique take on the GRE? Like, as opposed to because I know test prep is a huge industry. A lot of people offer courses. A lot of people offer different strategies to improve your scores, like you were saying. But what's your unique take? Like all that experience you just shared, what does that give you, your perspective, that gives you that empirical validation, that gives you that effectiveness?
Okay, well, let me first finish by explaining what that empirical validation was.
Okay.
So, as I mentioned, I've been teaching small group classes for about 4 years prior to the shutdowns around the pandemic. So I was able to collect pre and post outcome data for hundreds of students that were enrolled in my course. And what I discovered is that on average, students improved around 3 times the score guarantees of my competitors. That was the average actual improvement as a result of participation in that class. And I think that comes down to 35 percentile points. It's all on my website. I'm pretty transparent with the data. But that's a significant improvement for a 2-month engagement. Like if your income went up 35% in 2 months, you'd probably be pretty stoked, right? So my average student's response to engaging the Stellar system is 3 times what other programs promise you with respect to their score guarantees, which is actually pretty incredible in my opinion.
I just want to dig into this a little bit more.
Sure.
Because you were saying how one of the things that you've had that's unique is this empirical validation, and that other strategies of other companies might not be as transparent, as direct, saying oh yeah, just you get money back if you don't get the improvement you want. So the data that you're getting, you've had your own personal, I'm going to test you before I take you on as a student, and then you're going to share with me your test results after, so you get that quantitative
That's right.
data. How is it that you're comparing that to the results of other companies who are offering testing? Are they doing something similar?
No, they're not. That's kind of where I'm coming, is that as far as I know, Stellar is the only test prep company on the planet that actually collects outcome data.
Okay.
I mean, one of the dirty secrets of test prep is that it can often not work.
Right.
I mean, the vast majority of the students who contact me for test prep services at this point,
It's not their first time.
it's not their first rodeo. They've engaged services at some of my competitors. They've done exactly what they've told them to do, and they haven't yet gotten the results that they want. And I think that if some of my competitors were to try to collect the empirical data on outcomes, it wouldn't be as attractive as, say, offering a money-back score guarantee. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
That's my hunch.
that makes sense.
So what makes my system, Stellar, different from that of my competitors? This is a great question. I think Stellar is like the Tesla of test prep because it's been reimagined from the most fundamental axioms of what test prep is supposed to look like. In almost every respect, it is completely reimagined. And it's also always driven by empirical data. Like, for example, one of the easiest ways to accelerate your growth in GRE prep, for example, is to pay attention to base rates.
What's a base rate?
Base rate is how likely, it's like the encounter rate for a certain question type. Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay.
So the mistake that the vast majority of my competitors make is that they present all the material as if it's equally likely to occur on the GRE, which is absolutely not true.
Okay, I'm starting to understand. Let me make sure I understand. So you're saying that based on the base rates, based on how often certain types of questions come up, you focus your coursework, you weight it more heavily on the ones that come up more often.
Absolutely.
Right.
I've gone through thousands of practice tests developed and released by ETS, thousands of practice questions, not tests, but thousands of practice questions developed and released by ETS, the makers of the GRE, and I have diagnosed every single question that I've seen in these tests to collect this data empirically, and I've learned that some questions literally have 100 times greater likelihood of appearing on the test than others. And it doesn't make sense to delegate your attention and efforts as a student equally over all concepts when there's these vast disparities between the encounter rates of certain question types. And so the Stellar system incorporates that fundamentally into the test prep program in that, one, question types with higher base rates are weighted more heavily in our practice sets and our practice tests, but also they appear earlier and more frequent throughout the program, so that you're training and you're practicing with high encounter questions far more than low encounter questions. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you just get more bang for your buck. This is part of like working smarter, not harder, which is a big part of what I do as an educator.
No, that sounds really exciting. Well, thanks for tuning in, and we'll be back next week for another bite-sized episode of GRE Bites. If you have a topic you'd like to discuss on a future episode, let us know at StellarGRE@gmail.com. And if you're interested in other GRE prep or grad school consulting, check out StellarGRE.com. That's your website, right?
That it is.
All right. Talk to you soon, man.
Thanks, Davis.